week 6 of 6. Next week we'll start our focus for the fall. We'll be walking through the stories of Genesis as we go through this fall, and we'll have fun with that. But today we have these, what I'm calling the 10 Commandments of Hebrews. It's that the end of the letters in the New Testament are often my favorite parts of those letters because we see these lists oftentimes of commands or ethical instruction. And they usually seem to be just an afterthought of the writer, and the church often treats them as an afterthought too. But they're more important than that to me, because I feel like here we get a clear picture of what this writer thinks is important about how Christians can live and should be living, and how the community can be, the sort of goal the community can be working towards. So with Hebrews, we have this basic message throughout the book of Hebrews, that God has entered into the world in Jesus Christ to save it. And Jesus, by sacrificing himself on the cross as a perfect high priest, the perfect mediator between God and the world, has brought the world back to God. And through this, God has forgiven all sins for all time. The world and communities and individuals have a chance to start over at any moment. And the question then might be, well, so if I'm going to start over, then what should I focus on? What should we be focused on? What does that look like? And the writer says, well, here's my top 10. Let mutual love continue, number 1. 2, show hospitality to strangers. 3, remember those in prison. 4, I know there's lots of deep relationships in this community, the writer's saying, but just be mindful of that. Don't let admiration turn to infatuation. Just be careful, okay? 5, be careful about money, and the list goes on. These sorts of lists, we often get kind of edgy about commandments, but these sorts of lists are helpful for me, and I think for us. So I have this little sheet here. You can take it home. You can put it on your refrigerator or put it on your dashboard next to your Packer bobblehead figurine in your car. Whatever you need to do. If it's helpful, you can have it and you can see it. What we'll do today is we'll spend time with 3 of these. 3 that I think are particularly important or interesting to be talking about in this time and place. So those are, number 1, let mutual love continue. Number 2, show hospitality to strangers. And then the third will be number 5, that one about money. So, as I mentioned in the children's sermon, this is talking about mutual love, and that's a particular type of love. It's significant that the writer says, let mutual love continue, and not just let love continue. Because mutual love assumes that love is shared work, that there are 2 participants equally working at relationship, that love, giving and receiving goes both ways. Part of my natural personality is that I'm an observer, I'm a listener, I'm an introvert. These sorts of things come naturally to me. So if I'm in a social setting, in a party or whatever, I'm fine with just being on the edges of things, just listening, just watching it all happen. If I'm in a conversation with somebody, I can hear story after story after story and not feel the need to talk. I can leave a conversation, walk away without saying anything, and I don't feel bad. I don't feel like there's anything fundamentally wrong. I don't feel shortchanged. But I realized one day, this is actually a realization that went through my head, I realized, for a conversation to work, I've got to talk. I can't believe it. If story after story is being shared, at some point I've got to tell a story too. I've got to share what I think. I've got to share what I'm coming from. And maybe some of you who are natural talkers or storytellers, I know nobody is out there, maybe you've had a realization like that too. For conversation to work, at some point I've got to shut down. I can't just be giving all the time. At some point I have to receive the other too. Relationship is always shared work. Love is always shared work, giving and receiving. In the church, we've often talked about love in more sacrificial terms. We often think of Christian love as being sacrifice, like Jesus on the cross. And this has its place, but this theme of mutual love is central to the New Testament as well, more so than sacrificial love even. And that notion of sacrificial love can be somewhat dangerous, especially in relationships that are abusive. And people who have been in abusive relationships have often heard the church say, stay there and just act like Christ. Give out love even when all you're receiving is abuse in return. And that's not helpful. That's dangerous. And this focus on mutual love can be a guard against that. Mutual love guards against abuse. It involves selflessness, but at the same time, mutual love holds the other accountable. And the best example I've seen of that is a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Buddhist monk, who I like a lot and quote regularly. I've used this at weddings before, so some may have heard this before, but Thich Nhat Hanh says this, and for this to make sense, imagine that you are in a fight, if you can imagine such a thing. Imagine that you're in a fight and you've been hurt and you just don't want to reconcile. You don't want to take that step forward. And Thich Nhat Hanh says this. He says, in true love, there's no place for pride. That's the selfless part. Then he says, you share happiness and adversity with this person, so you must go to him or her and share the truth about your suffering. And here's the holding the other accountable piece. He says, you say to them, dear one, I am suffering too much. I want you to help me. Explain to me why you said that to me. Now this is bold. Actually doing this in relationship is very bold. You have to be very vulnerable to do that. And you have to have a lot of trust that the other truly loves. And that the other wouldn't have reason to do you harm. That something must have happened in that relationship for that harm to happen. But this, if mutual love looks like this, if community life can look like this, we get this picture of Christian church that's very appealing, where you have two partners in relationship, people in relationship, and they trust that there is love there on both sides. Natural brokenness happens, but there's enough faith, enough trust in love there that true reconciliation can happen. People can come together again, and then that love deepens, and the process starts over. This is what church can look like. And this love isn't just for us, it's also for those outside the boundaries of this community. And that's where we move on to number 2. Show hospitality to strangers. For this writer to say this to this particular early church is really remarkable. Because as we've said every week as we've been going through Hebrews, this is a church in crisis. They're facing extreme persecution. The authorities show up every once in a while and drag someone off to jail. As people go out to do their shopping, it's not unusual for them to come home and find that their home has been ransacked. Their stuff has been taken. People have been looking for things or just are in their things trying to intimidate them. So everyone that this community would have looked at outside of their community was seen as a threat, was seen as dangerous. And here this writer says, the second most important thing you need to be doing is showing hospitality to strangers. Wow. Don't fear them. Invite them into your homes. Trust more. Fear less. Assume goodness in those who surround you. I've been reading the book Wicked by Gregory Maguire. Have any of you read the book or seen the musical? It's turned into a musical too. It's the life and times of the Wicked Witch of the West, this book. It's a lot of fun. But you start off following the Wicked Witch as a baby. She's born as a baby, this little green, horrible baby. And she's an awful baby. And I'm thinking as I'm reading this, I know exactly where this is going to go. Just give her the broom and the hat and let's get it over with. And we're on our way. But then she goes off to college. And we see her start forming friendships and coming out of her shell. And she has healthy friendships, wonderful friendships with her other classmates around her. And then she gets attached to a cause, and she starts protecting the vulnerable in the land of Oz at that time. And we see her fall in love. And I'm reading the book thinking, wow, I like the Wicked Witch of the West. And I think, how crazy is this? And I start to feel some tension in me, because if I can't hate the Wicked Witch of the West, then who's left? Right? And I think that's the point of the book. Or one. That there's always a backstory. There's always humanness. There's always goodness. No matter how much evil is surrounding someone, there's always goodness there. And we are people who are called to see the Christ in the other and to trust more and to fear less.